Hey ladies and gentlemen, in this video series we're going to learn how to use MySQL to store data for applications. MySQL is a database system, and it's arguably the most popular database system used by developers. And the point of a database is to store data for your application and to easily access that data. MySQL is a relational database system. So you build tables that have relationships to each other and then query on those tables to connect data. Like, for example, you might have users and users types, and you join the users types table onto the users to get data for the users and the user types. That's kind of an example of a relationship database. Okay, so how do you get MySQL? Well, that's a little bit dependent on your operating system. In this tutorial series, we're going to be using Linux Mint, which is built off Ubuntu 14.04, I believe. But if you are on a Windows system, you can use this installer here. So you can either Google for the MySQL installer, or you can type this in, or you can go to mysql.com, go to downloads and find it. And it'll bring you to this page here. And you just select your operating system. In this case, I Googled for the Windows ones, that's why I got this. And here's the installers here. You can download the MSI installer, or the full installer. So this one here will run through a series of steps and download it as you go. And this one here is the entire installer. Either way, you're probably gonna be downloading around 320 megs. I suggest the best thing to do is probably just download the big one. And then here's your checksum to make sure that you get the data. Okay, get that the installer, a proper installer. There's no errors in the installer. Okay, so now that you know how to do it in Windows, we're gonna learn how to do it in Linux. So real quick, pull up your terminal. We're going to maximize this. I'm using Terminator here. Terminator. Anyway. So, because we're using an Ubuntu system, you need to use apt-get to install it. So sudo apt-get install MySQL server. And you type in my password, and you'll see I already have it installed. If you didn't have it installed, it'll run through a series of steps and ask you a password. That password it's asking you for is your root password. So now we're going to log in as the root user. And there we go. And now you're inside MySQL. Another way to access MySQL is through the Workbench, which when you install it, you'll get in Windows. This comes as one of the options. If you're not in Windows, you need to go download this directly from the MySQL website, which you can just Google MySQL Workbench, and there we go. Download. Oh, hold on. Oh, I thought it was here. There we go. I missed the button. Go to the bottom, select your platform. We're in Ubuntu Linux, and download. Very, very good. Okay. In the MySQL Workbench, you can do your queries, see your table definitions. It's kind of a nice tool, but I prefer command line. But everything we do in the command line, you can do here. So, let's go kind of look at the MySQL terminal. Okay. So in MySQL, when you're storing data, you have something called databases, which is where you store tables, and tables store rows of data. So for example, if you have an application, let's just say you have a e-commerce website, and you want to store users, then you'd say create database, base, maybe you want to call it commerce, I don't know, just call it com for now, it's easy. Database com, and say show databases. You'll see com is right here, and then we will use com. Now we're in the com database. Now you need to insert tables into that com database in order to store data. So, and I know I'm going a little bit quick. We'll go back over it in more detail later, but I just want to give you a quick run through for how databases work. Okay, so we'll say show tables, and there's no tables in it. Let's create a table. Table, users, let's say an ID, integer, primary key, not null, auto, increment. There you go, show tables. And now you have a users table. Okay, so what did I do here? Well, tables have definitions. So a user could have a first name, a last name, an email, a password, different ways to store data in the users table. And usually in any table created in a database, you also want to give it an auto-incrementing ID. And the reason behind that is it's easier to query on an ID, and it gives a unique identifier for each user. Like, for example, let's just say you're building a large website and you have two Mike Johnsons, and they both are, have Mike Johnson at Gmail and Mike J at Gmail. It might be hard to differentiate between the two, but every time you insert a new user, the database will look for a primary key and increment that primary key, so each user has a specific ID tied to their name. So let's insert to users. Let's see, ID value. Oh, actually, let's show the auto incrementing. Users and values. I believe you can do this. And then we'll do it a couple times. And then we'll say select star from users. And you'll see we didn't enter any data into the user table. We have two rows, and the ID got auto incremented. Now, normally you'd add other fields to this table. In this case, we didn't, just because I wanted to show you a very basic table, basic database, basic setup. But you'll see that the user's IDs are auto-incremented. Okay, that's kind of a lot of information quickly, but you can see kind of how you can store data into a database quickly. Now let's actually build a users table that is useful. Okay, so we'll say drop users. Okay, oops, drop table users. Excuse me. Oops, table users. There we go. Show tables. Now there's no table. No, there's no users table. So let's create a users table here. So you want to have multiple definitions. You want multiple fields in the users table. So we'll say first varchar 6. We'll explain all this stuff in more detail later. Just let's build something that we can see. Last varchar 60. And I'll do email varchar 60, and then we'll do password varchar 60. Okay, so let's insert into this table some users. So we'll say first, last, email, and password. Now, quick thing about passwords: you never want to insert passwords just as raw text, and we'll go over why that is later. But I'm going to do that now. Just know in a production system, never ever do what I'm about to do. But I'll show you how to encrypt your passwords later. Okay, so let's the first one, Mike Smith, Mike S at mail.com or something like that, and then we'll give him a password of password 1. Okay, there's our first user. I'll say John Tower, I don't know, John T at mail, and he has password of 2. Then we'll select the data from that table. You'll see, there we go. So that's kind of how the structure of tables and databases work. So the idea is you create a database to use, which is what we did up here. Create a database. And then we wanted to store some data, users. So we set up what the users table should look like here in the SQL statement here. And then we inserted, which is putting the data into the database. And then we selected to show what those users look like. Now, sometimes you may only want certain data. So that's where the select statement comes in. SQL statements are what you use to handle the database structure, database itself, so MySQL itself, individual tables, individual fields inside tables, and use those with SQL statements. And there's a lot of them. So one of the ones that's probably most commonly used is select. And select is the way you pull data from the database, how you get data from. So in this example, we use select to show all the users. Okay. There's also update, which is you update a field in the database. So you'd say like update first name of this user with this ID, or however you do it, and that allows you to change the data. There's delete, which removes a whole row from a table. Select, update, delete are kind of the most commonly used statements. Okay, so and insert as well, so you can put new data in. So delete is you pull data, you destroy data. Inserts, you put new data in. Update is how you alter data already existing, and select is how you show data that it does exist in the database. Okay, so I think that's kind of a lot of information initially. But let's show some of those methods, SQL methods, in action. So now that we've seen select, let's show some of the options you can do from select. So you can say, let's say we do select. So the first thing here is your method, and then what you're selecting. So in this, you'd say first, last, and then you'd say from. Hold this properly. Usually your SQL statements and what you're doing are uppercase, and the data you're handling is usually lowercase. So it's users where ID equals 1. So what we're doing here is we're saying select, which is the method. So SQL will know what we're pulling data from. So go grab data from the database. We're telling it what we're grabbing and what table we're grabbing it from, and how to adjust the data that it's showing. So in this case, we'll select that data, and you'll see it only grabs this data right here, because it says select first and last from the user's table where ID is equal to 1. Okay. So just for fun's sake, I'm going to just insert the same data multiple times here. Okay. So you do this, you see, or ID is equal to 7. And you'll see, let me show you here from users, you'll see it only grabs here and here. Okay. So now that you have a basic understanding of a basic select statement and how to pull data from a database, you've learned how to create a database itself and a table and define that table and pull data in and out. I think we've learned quite a bit for the first video. In the next video, we're going to learn how to manipulate this create table statement to create custom tables, and we're going to learn all the different ways, all the different types of data types you can use in a table to structure your database. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks.